Hi everyone! Today I'm going to be doing my February reading wrap up, but I just want to start off by saying that if I look like I'm a mess, it's because I am a mess, and I literally tossed on a wig to hide how much of a mess I am, but then the more I kept staring at myself in my camera, the more I'm like, I need a clarification about what's going on. So I have depression, and it's been a little worse than normal lately, and I also have self-confidence issues, a lot of which stems from being groomed last year. So I'm not doing the greatest right now, and like tomorrow I'm stressed because I'm going up to Seattle tomorrow for Emerald City Comic Con. This will come up after Emerald City Comic Con. The guy who groomed me always goes there though, so like I'm gonna potentially have to like see him, and I'm looking forward to it because I want to hang out with friends and I want to cosplay, and ooh, I don't like that noise on my laptop, and I want to like meet guests and stuff and see cool art, but like my whole life has sort of been messed up by this 39-year-old who decided to groom me last year because he wanted to be in a relationship with me. Anyways, enough about sad stuff. Let's get on to the books that I read this month. I read 8 books this month. I planned out my reading a little more than I normally do for each month this month, just because I want to make sure that I was able to film this wrap up before I go up to Seattle. So I haven't calculated my star rating for this month, but I'm guessing it's not gonna be like too high or too low because I have no 5-star reads this month and I have no 1-star reads, and I feel like that's gonna average out to somewhere between like 2.8 to like 3.4 maybe, or 3.6, I don't know, somewhere around there. Without further ado, let's get on into this. So one of my goals for 2024 was to finish reading the arc of the Scythe series or decide whether I wanted to DNF it or not. I have decided to finish the series in its entirety. I haven't been able to get a hold of the 4th book yet, The Gleanings, because I'm trying so hard to not buy that many new books right now. The reason I'm trying not to buy as many books right now is because I reorganized my bookshelf recently, and let me tell you, my fibromyalgia flared up from how many freaking books I kept having to rearrange. So once I'm ready to read The Gleanings, I will buy it on Kindle. But I started off this month reading Thunderhead by Neal Shusterman. So the Scythe series is a series in which death has pretty much been overcome, but they have to cope with overpopulation, and the way they do that is they hire these people to be scythes, and scythes are the only people who are allowed to kill people, and each scythe has their own different philosophy and stuff about it. So the first book follows these 2 teens who have been chosen to be apprentices to become scythes. So there is Rowan and there is Citra. So that's the plot of the first book, and then this book obviously has advanced so far from that that it's like a completely different story now. So I was really disappointed by this one. So it's hard to like sort of put into words my issues fully. Like a lot of it I just felt like meh, I'm not connected to it anymore, and I couldn't figure out why for a long time, but I figured out why once I read the 3rd book, which I read later this month. So I'll talk about why I feel so emotionally disconnected and like not as thrilled with these sequels as much once I talk about the 3rd book. I ended up giving this book 3 stars, and I think that books that are 3 stars, sometimes it's easier for me to like separate positives versus negatives instead of just spewing out my thoughts on it. So I like spending more time in the world and seeing the world expanded more. I really like seeing Endora and the ancient libraries. I also really liked Manira's plotline, and I almost said who Manira's with in this book, and I realized I didn't put a spoiler warning on my review. Oops. It's fine. People probably won't read my review on Goodreads unless they've read the 1st book in its entirety, right? So I can have a little spoiler for the 1st book in my review for the 2nd book, right? Hopefully it's fine. I loved the plot twists in the stories. I honestly think that plot twists are one of Neal Shusterman's specialties, and I really liked the last like 50 or so pages of this book. Like the last 50 or so pages is super fast-paced, intense, and so much action and plot twist after plot twist after plot twist. Now the negatives. The story moseyed on for too long without one destination in mind. It felt like it kept just going on and on and on. Like, you obviously know who these 3 main characters are, and you know that eventually their storylines will interconnect, but a lot of times it felt like you're just following their day-to-day daily activities and jobs. I also really didn't like the Thunderhead's ramblings in here. Like in the 1st book you get these little like insights into different Scythe journals, but in this one you just get like Thunderhead ramblings, and most of them were like really boring and pointless and not necessary to the story. And then my final big issue, and my biggest issue with this book in general, is just that it felt so different from the 1st book, to the point that like I felt so disconnected from it. Like the characters felt so bland and it just felt very meh. So I think I like overall like this one, or at least I'd say that it's like okay, but it wasn't my favorite. I still adore the first book. The first book is still one of my favorite books of all time, but this second book does not live up to the first book's amazingness. Then I read The Cardboard Kingdom. It just says Chad Sell in here, but there is other authors involved in here as well. So let me go over really quickly all the different authors that are in this book. If I can find them, I think they're at the end of the book. Jay Fuller, David Demio, Katie Schenkel, Manuel Betancourt, Molly Muldoon, Vid Alliger, Cloud Jacobs, Michael Cole, Barbara Perez, and then Chris Moore passed away, but he was part of what helped bring this book to life. So I have a vlog coming out at some point within the next couple of months or few months, and it's going to be me reading different graphic novels, and this is one of them. So I will talk more in depth about this book in that video and why I chose to read it and whatnot. Essentially, this book is about these characters who like to use cardboard and create different like fantasy kingdoms and like role play and act like different characters. Like here's a kid who dresses up as a robot. So it's very much centered towards a younger age group than me, but there is a reason why I read this book. So if you're interested in seeing why I chose to read this book and why I own this book, then you'll have to check out my reading vlog when that comes out. Overall, I would say that it does some really good things. I think it has great diversity. I think I would have really liked it when I was a kid. And I think a lot of kids will be able to see themselves in these characters and in this story. So I'm choosing not to rate this one because I feel like I would have liked it when I was younger, but my thoughts on it are very drastically different based on my age when I'm reading it. So that's why I'm choosing not to rate it. Then I read Demon Slayer Volume 20, which is by Koyoharu Gotoge. And I liked this one a lot. And this volume in particular is so heartbreaking because literally 2 of my favorite characters die in this volume. And like I was in denial and tried to pretend that they weren't dead until I read the next volume. So I really liked this one. I liked the battle in here. I liked the different characters in here, and I liked, well, okay, I liked the way that these characters that are my favorite kept their morals until the end of the story. Even when it came to them dying, they still fought for what they believed in. I don't know why my dog's barking right now. She's probably wanting me, but I'm filming. So the only issue I had with this book is that this is Upper Moon 1, and I found that Upper Moon 1's backstory was not the greatest because it made him come off as like a jealous, salty sibling, and he's Upper Moon 1. I wanted some like epic, tragic backstory to him, but I felt really disappointed in his backstory. So because of his backstory, I ended up docking off a star, so I ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars, so it was like really, really good, but it could have been better if Upper Moon 1's backstory was better. Then I read an arc from NetGalley, and it was not the greatest. I have been having really bad luck with the NetGalley arcs recently for some reason. So I don't even fully know how to describe this book because do you know like the Alice in Wonderland vibes of books where it's just like a randomness that's never explained and anything could happen and the plot isn't super unified? That's basically what this book was going for. So this book is called Rhydon Rhys, or Rhydon Rhys. I'm going to say Rhydon Rhys and the Broken Moon because I read his name as Rhydon throughout the whole book. This is by Matt Guzman. So basically, the story starts off with a boy, and the boy is living with his mom, and one night the moon explodes and this mysterious shadow person comes out of the moon, and this shadow man comes right to his window and takes him on a big adventure. Oh boy. So yeah, that doesn't even feel like it captures the story because like it's so random what happens in the story. This is a middle grade fantasy / science fiction story. So I thought that this book started off really strong. Like it jumped right into the action and the writing was like super quirky right off the bat, and I was literally vibing with it. I was thinking it would be awesome, but then everything started to go downhill really fast with the world building. I just really wish that things had been explained even slightly, but nothing was explained. I used to love Alice in Wonderland type stories, but maybe I have just changed like with my reading taste because I am not into those anymore. So I really could not vibe with the story because there was no sense of like why things were happening. And there were so many questions that I desperately needed answers to that were never explained. So like, why was there an incident with someone having a cotton candy cheek that was never explained? Why do some of the characters have heads that are black holes Yes, their heads are literal black holes. Why the whole leeches thing? And like, if those questions seem odd and confusing to you, then you're probably not gonna like this book, because that's a huge part of the book, those three things. I also was like really disappointed in one part of this book, which was that I felt like Reedon really showed signs that he was autistic or neurodivergent, and he just felt very like neurodivergent coded. So then it surprised me that there was a character who is pretty much labeled as autistic, but Reedon was being ableist towards that kid. So Reedon is the main character, and you sort of see inside his head, and he was like, I don't believe that Brian has autism despite his diagnosis. And I was like, that's really invalidating to say in the first place. And then Reedon only talked negatively about this character who's autistic, and Reedon only brought Brian into the picture when he needed something out of Brian. And I just really was disgusted by the way that this book dealt with this character who is autistic. I was also really surprised by this because therapy is mentioned a lot throughout this book, and I actually was really satisfied with the therapy representation, and I thought that someone who was so in tune to different therapy and mental health things would be really attuned into neurodivergence, but apparently this author is not attuned to neurodivergence, just attuned to therapy for like mental health issues that aren't neurodivergence. So yeah, I ended up giving this one 2 stars. It had a lot of potential, but it just fell really flat for me. Then I read a really big chunker. I read The Toll by Neal Shusterman. That's really thick. Like, let me see how many pages it is. It is 625 pages. So this one was definitely a step up from Thunderhead, but it can't compare to the first book size. So this book is really complex because there is so many different plot lines that are being followed in here, but that complexity made it so that I was really intrigued and I kept wanting to know how they were going to all come together. Then I was very satisfied when they did all come together because I thought that was done really well. The book has great pacing, like it's super long, but I felt like I flew through it quickly because I felt like it was paced really, really well. I loved the creative settings and innovations that Neal Shusterman added to this dystopian world. I also feel like there's a huge potential for a spin-off series that has a more sci-fi take to it based on the way that this book ends. I also love Jericho so much. Jericho is gender fluid, and I really liked the way that Neal Shusterman explored gender fluidity in here. I couldn't give this one 5 stars though because I wasn't satisfied with Minira's ending, especially since she was one of my favorite characters. Most of her final moments in this book is just her being jealous, and that was really disappointing to me because she had so much promise and she was such a great character in Thunderhead and in a lot of The Toll. Now though, it felt like there was something missing from this book, and it felt like there was something missing from Thunderhead, and I figured out why finally. The issue why is because Rowan and Citra are very bland characters when they're not with each other. I think that's why I liked the first book so much and why I fell in love with the characters in that book. It's because Rowan and Citra can be their true selves when they're with each other, and they only ever open up to each other and be their true personalities with each other. So when they're separated, they're these bland characters who are very refined and not opening up and not as interesting. Unfortunately, the only book that they are consistently with each other all the time is the first book in this series, and I won't go more into that and their situations of why they're not together, but that was really disappointing for me, and I figured out that that's why I had an issue with these second 2 books in the series. However, despite my couple issues with this book, I still gave it 4 stars. I thought it was a fairly solid way to end the original trilogy, and now I'm really interested to read The Gleanings and see where Neal Shusterman and other authors choose to explore this universe more. Then I read Demon Slayer Volume 21, and when I tell you that the first chapter in this volume destroyed me. Chapter 179, Feelings for Elder Brother, Feelings for Younger Brother. Can this author please pay for my therapy bills? Because there was no right for this chapter to be as sad as it was. I couldn't deny that 2 of my favorite characters were dead any longer. It's just so depressing. I loved getting to see more out of Murata in this volume. I think that's how you say his name. He's a character that's been consistently there for such a long time, but I feel like he never really gets his moment to shine and gets any big important roles in the story until this volume. Honestly though, I did have one slight issue with this book, which is that a lot of this felt like just filler to prepare for the final battle with Muzan. And I mean, it starts sort of the final battle, but it felt like filler just setting it up a little more. So I ended up giving volume 21 4 stars. Then I read volume 22. I spent such an embarrassingly long time thinking that this was a new demon that has never been seen before in this series. We've seen demons have drastic changes in their final moments. Like, why did my brain think this must be a new demon? I read volume 22, and volume 22 is a lot of the final battle with Muzan. I feel like this one was really fast-paced and interesting. I'm really glad that some of the Hashira who are less popular and less like written about in this series get their time to shine, like Obanai and Goyumi. I don't know if I'm saying their names right. I feel like there is so much that needs to happen in the final volume because there's just one more volume left after this. Like, I have seen spoilers for all the major character deaths in this series. Why is there like 4 freaking characters that I know die that haven't died yet in this volume? Like, what's going on with that? So I'm anxious to see how things will play out in the final volume, but I'm also really excited to see how things will play out. I gave this one 4 stars. It's really good. I think that everyone should read this series if you're into manga, because honestly, Demon Slayer is my favorite or second favorite. I think I'm just gonna say Sailor Moon and Demon Slayer are tied now and stop trying to rank the two because I can't discern which one I like better, Demon Slayer or Sailor Moon. So I'm gonna say that this is tied for my favorite manga series. It is just so fantastic, and I wish I could get it like sent directly into my veins to go to my brain so that I can remember every detail and every emotion I feel while reading this series. I ended this month with a book that I read through Kindle Unlimited, and this book is The Bar Next Door by Katia Rose, and it is the first book in the Barflies series. So I literally finished this one last night. I timed my reading of this book just perfectly so that I can film my wrap up today before I hop on the train. So this book follows Monroe and Julian. Monroe works at a famous dive bar in Montreal, Canada, and she loves this bar. She is so happy to be working there. She feels so much responsibility there, and she loves the community that this dive bar has. However, the place next door has just gone on sale, and this man named Julian comes into the picture, and Julian bought that location to try and put in a wine bar. So Monroe immediately dislikes Julian because her dive bar is struggling, and she knows that his wine bar will be taking customers from her dive bar. So there's already tension and stakes there, but some feelings start to brew that they can't deny. So I knew right off the bat that I wouldn't like this book, unfortunately. I recently finished reading the Sherbrooke Station series, and in that series there is a super toxic couple, and the way that they got together borders on grooming, and that is Roxanne and Cole. And Roxanne is Monroe's best friend, and Monroe encourages Roxanne's relationship with Cole, and Monroe is the reason why Roxanne was able to be so close to Cole for such a long time in Montreal. So I wasn't happy with that because I don't like that someone is encouraging that unhealthy relationship. But furthermore, if Monroe was truly Roxanne's best friend, she should be saying something, saying, I don't think Cole is good for you. I don't think your relationship dynamics are okay. Like, I don't understand people who encourage their friends, or especially best friends, to do things that are detrimental to their health and their mental well-being. Like, I don't understand Monroe and why she would be encouraging this relationship. And then there was also a bunch of other reasons why I disliked Monroe as well, but that whole issue with Roxanne was the biggest one. I wasn't a huge fan of Julian at first either. He definitely grew on me because he grew to become a better person, but he was super cocky and full of himself, and he's just like a typical rich, arrogant guy at the start of the book. He definitely grew and became better, but at the start of the book I could not stand him. So due to me not liking Monroe and initially not liking Julian, I couldn't root for their relationship, and I didn't feel as much chemistry between them as I felt with a lot of Katia's other fictional characters that she's paired up in her other books. Dee Dee is a side character who also has a lot of like screen time in this book, or like page time. Screen time is like for TV shows and stuff. But Dee Dee really got on my nerves, and I was so sick of her every time she would come on the page, which sucks that she has her own book in this series, because this is a 4-book series and Dee Dee is in the 3rd book. Like, it's her relationship that's being focused on the 3rd book. So not looking forward to that, but also sort of looking forward to it because I love Katia Rose's books normally. I also felt like there was too much French in here. Like, I couldn't understand a lot of what was being said in French. There was just so much French in there, and I'm fine when Katia infuses French into her books because I am aware that in Canada a lot of people speak French and people are bilingual a lot for English and French, but I felt like there was just a little bit too much French in this book for my liking. There were a couple things I liked about this book though. I appreciated how this book helped me look at bars in a different light because I'm not a huge drinker, I'm not into alcohol, but I really like seeing how this dive bar brought so many people together and formed this big community. I also liked how Monroe and Julian constantly worked to improve each other. Like, Julian worked on helping Monroe focus on herself more because Monroe was just focused on everybody else, and Monroe helped Julian look at one of his relationships with a different perspective, which I thought was really interesting. I ended up giving this book 2 stars because I honestly didn't like that much. I feel so bad for giving this a low star rating because I love Katia Rose, but unfortunately The Bar Next Door is just not for me, and I'm really hoping that the other 3 books in the series will somehow change things for me because there are a few authors who I made it a goal to read every single one of their books, and Katia Rose is one of them, so yeah. So those were all the books that I read this month. I need to go pack to go to Seattle. I leave tomorrow, so I have to go pack. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to me if you haven't already. I tried to upload a video at least once every week, so I hope all of you stick around for my next video, which will most likely be coming out next Monday. I hope your March is a very wonderful month, and I will see all of you in my next video. Until next time, goodbye.